I'd like to welcome you to the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. We are the largest African American history museum in the world, and particularly that is community focused. So having completed last year our 50th anniversary, we are looking to strengthen and to grow this particular museum by partnering with you. We are going to make a request that if you're not a member of this museum, since it's our museum and the membership is $35, that you really reflect on that and look to contribute to your own institution out of the idea of cooperative economics. For those who are not aware, the Liberation Film Series is in its 4th year. We conceptualized this program as the museum being a central hub of the community and doing tentacle outreach to all the associated African American study departments and like institutions nationally and globally, so that we could actually invite in scholars, activists, those who are on the front lines, those who have participated in the movement, so we can have a primary source conversation around critical and controversial and important films, but then give the community an opportunity to interact with our speaker so we can have a conversation. What we promote is literacy. Reading is very important. All our programs have associated with them as much as we can important books. Kathleen recommended the books that we will be offering for sale and signing today: Liberation, Imagination, and the Black Panther Party. Dr. Errol Anthony Henderson. He's an associate professor of political science at Penn State University, where he teaches international relations, U.S. foreign policy, the analysis of war and peace, and African politics. Brother Errol earned his PhD in political science at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor in 1993. He is the author of more than 30 scholarly publications, including 3 books, and he has lectured throughout North America, Europe, and Africa. He was born and raised here in Detroit in the Brewster Projects. On the east side of Detroit, where I'm from, Errol. And there's really no historical basis for that separation, you know. It kind of brings to mind the comment that my cousin, General Baker Jr., used to state: there's no historical reason for the separation on what were a false demarcation. As I'm thinking of my cousin, General Baker, I should make the statement that we named this film series, the theme is Advance the Struggle. As some of his last words before he departed, that we must close ranks as a coalition, build coalitions, and advance the struggle for human rights. Errol was a noted student and political activist, and he helped lead 2 successful student movements. First, in 1987, in response to the racist threats against black women on the campus of University of Michigan Ann Arbor. This led to a profound change on the University of Michigan campus. He also led an extended protest that included an 11-day building occupation at Wayne State University. The program I talked about on February 25th from 3 to 5 at Patrick Auditorium at Wayne State Law School. He'll be speaking about that. In 1989, he led the creation of a long sought-after Department of Africana Studies. Dr. Henderson served as the director of the Peace Program for a community-based nonprofit organization. Many of you know the name, Save Our Sons and Daughters, a transformative program. This program was consisted of families and friends of children killed in Detroit. Henderson organized, developed, and extended the peace programs under the leadership of SOSAD's founder, Clementine Barfield, who was a survivor of her teenage child's homicide. He helped establish SOSAD chapters throughout the country and participated in a national urban peace and justice summit, the Gang Summit, in 1993 that brought together over 200 gang members from 22 different cities to attempt to implement a national truce, a peacemaker. He is presently completing research on 2 books, one on the role of religion in the world politics, and another on the role of culture in the Black liberation struggle of the 1960s and 70s. Please welcome me, with great applause, Dr. Errol Henderson.
Thank you very much for that much too undeserved introduction, Brother Ferrell. I just don't know many folks who work as hard as this brother. Brother Ferrell has done so much for this film series, and he does, many of us didn't believe for a long time that he didn't work for the museum. But he started doing this work when he was doing some IT work. But he's devoted so much time, so much dedication to it, and his motivation, his positive attitude is infectious, and it's just so good to be in the presence of folks like that. So thank you so much, Brother Charles. I know what you all are here to see, here to hear, so let me be brief, but let me be appropriate. Kathleen neal-Cleaver has spent most of her life participating in the human rights struggle. Since 2000, Professor Cleaver has served as the co-director of the Atlanta-based Human Rights Research Fund, part of a network of anti-racist organizations engaged in documenting violations of the human rights of U.S. citizens who challenge the racist and military policies within the United States. From 2000 to 2014, she was a senior lecturer at Yale University's African American Studies Department. Cleaver also holds an appointment as a senior lecturer and research fellow at Emory University School of Law in Atlanta. In 1966, Kathleen Neal dropped out of Barnard College to work full-time with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, where she served in the campus program. From 1967 to 1971, she was the communications secretary of the Black Panther Party and the first woman member of their Central Committee. After sharing years of exile with her former husband, Eldridge Cleaver, in Algeria and France, she returned to the United States in late 1975. She graduated summa cum laude with a BA in history from Yale College in 1984 and was elected to Phi Beta Kappa. After receiving a JD from Yale Law School in 1989, Cleaver became an associate with the law firm of Kravitz, Swain, and Moore. Afterwards, she clerked for the late Judge A. Leon Higginbottom of the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit in Philadelphia. Cleaver joined the faculty at Emory University Law School in 1992. Devoting many years to challenging racist injustice, Cleaver has worked to free imprisoned freedom fighters, including Geronimo Jajaga Pratt and Mumia Abu-Jamal. In 1993, she served on the Georgia Supreme Court Commission on Racial and Ethnic Bias in the Courts and became a board member of the Southern Center for Human Rights. Cleaver has taught as a visiting faculty member at Benjamin H. Cardozo School of Law in New York, the Graduate School of Yale University, and Sarah Lawrence College, where she was the Joanne Woodward Professor of Public Policy during 1999, and most recently was a visiting professor of law at the University of Texas Law School during the spring of 2009. This strikes me as it's so important to do justice to the work that folks have done, but also to challenge notions that you can't be a rigorous and vigorous fighter for black liberation and still command the attention and even come to dominate some of these institutions, even as many white supremacists and sexists and classists are there as well. We're only here because people like us, people who came before us, facing much more than many of us can ever imagine, made a space for us. So I want to do credit for this sister's record here. Cleaver has won numerous fellowships to complete her book, Memories of Love and War, which is still in progress, and was among the inaugural recipients of the Alphonse Fletcher Senior Fellowship from Harvard University. Her writing has appeared in various magazines and newspapers, and she has contributed scholarly essays to the book Critical Race Feminism, Critical White Studies, The Promise of Multiculturalism, and the Black Panther Party Reconsidered. She also has co-authored the book that Charles referred to you, about the Black Panther Party, Liberation, Imagination, and the Black Panther Party. She edited Target Zero, A Life in Writing, with collections of writings of Eldridge Cleaver. She has participated in international forums and study programs at the American University of Beirut in 2006, in Rio de Janeiro in 2007, and 2009 at the U.S. Law School Consortium's Summer Law and Policy programs. She was a delegate to the Third International Book Fair in Venezuela during November 2007, was an honored participant in the American delegation to the second Pan-African Cultural Festival held in Algiers, Algeria in July 2009. Kathleen Cleaver's path continues to engage her in forums, teaching, writing, and film projects that incorporate human rights concerns both within the United States and across the African diaspora. And just a point, just a personal point. I first heard of Kathleen Cleaver when I was in single digits in the Brewster Projects. I saw that big fro and the Black Panther Party. My oldest sister was a member of Detroit's Black Panther Party, while my older brother was fighting as a Marine in the Vietnam War. The contradictions were brought home to us quite readily, and even at an early age where I couldn't understand them. But it was the long reach of sisters like Kathleen Cleaver, revolutionaries, who challenged, just when that cat from the Washington Post asked her that question about a woman's role in revolution, and she said, nobody asked what's the black man's place in revolution, or what's the man's place in revolution. She challenged our notions of liberation. She challenged our notions of liberation as a nation, liberation with respect to male and female, women and men, girls and boys, and the class domination that we experience so readily in this country. So she spoke to me at a very early age. It's Kathleen Cleaver. But what's so telling about her is her broad reach. She reaches a brother in Chicago whose good friend Yvette Stevens. Tell him, talking like you talking, you need to go what they're talking about down there on Madison, where a young brother named Fred Hampton and his wife, or his common law wife soon to be, Deborah Johnson, were, Akua and Jerry, who we brought here. Yvette Stevens' name is Shaka Khan, and that young brother's name was Ronnie Irwin, but we know him as Ahmad Rahman. And his good friend was Spurgeon Jake Winters. And you want to learn about the heroism of the Black Panther Party, read about Spurgeon Jake Winters. When Ahmad came here and cultivated so much as a revolutionary here, falsely imprisoned, done over 20 years in captivity, not doing time, there's a difference. He was a political prisoner. It was so illegal what they did to Ahmad that a Republican released him. You know, that's got to be pretty bad. That was John Engler. Ahmad comes out, hit the ground running, earns a PhD in history at the University of Michigan, encouraging activists as well. It's so regrettable that our brother isn't here with us today, but he's always been inspiration since we brought him down here to Wayne State, we brought him in the classes, and he taught us and we listened. We argued too, we argued a lot, but we listened and learned. The other one, he reached out to the Jeffries Projects, working with a lot of folks on landlord-tenant rights, among other things, and going out west to bring back the first charter for the Detroit chapter of the Black Panther Party, Ron Scott. Ron Scott's dedication was immense. It was tremendous. And because many of you know about him and for his work against police brutality, a lot of you don't know. It's Ron Scott who developed the survival programs of Save Our Sons and Daughters. That was Ron Scott. What we call the Peace Program, he came up with that. So this is way beyond what many folks already think they know and already do know about Brother Ron. But this is what I see as this positive effect, this long arm, this reach of sisters like this. Kathleen Cleaver's reach is immense. Her dedication, her contributions are just immeasurable. And it's my esteemed pleasure to be able to welcome her, along with my friends and family, all of you here to Detroit. So I give you Kathleen neal-cleaver.
Power to the people, everybody. Power to the people. Makes me think when I hear him talk, what we believe was dare to struggle, dare to win. We should say dare to struggle, dare to fail, and try again. It was a youth, predominantly youth organization. I'm trying to think of how many people we had. One man who was 50. He was a veteran from World War II. He was named Chairman Brothers. Eldridge Cleaver was 32. Bobby Seale was 32 when I got there, and I'm not quite sure. But the rest of us were teenagers, and I was a friend of mine says, well, Kathleen, you could be a leader. I was 21. I wasn't a teenager. So it was a youth movement. It was a radical revolutionary movement during the time of something very significant that people don't talk about that much now, the Vietnam War, which was also another youth movement, which I had no idea until I saw films later about the Viet Cong and who they were. So wait a minute. They were like us. They were painters, they were artists, they were students, they were young people who wanted to free their country. And they were willing to give their lives. That's who we were. That's why most of us got put out of business. Or, what's the other thing they do to you? No, that's concluding. They try and present you something fake, some fraudulent version of what you were, and destroy what you are, but they can't destroy the spirit. I remember one of the leaders of the liberation movement, Jim Foreman. He lived here in Detroit for a while, and Foreman used to say, "We will win without a doubt." I said, "Yeah, Jim, but when?" We will win without a doubt. Just keep that in mind. Don't keep the doubt in mind. We will win. It's not clear actually what it is we are winning, because as we get more sophisticated in our understanding of the struggle, the country gets more fascist and more racist, the poverty increases. So I'm not quite sure what we're winning. We're winning the opportunity to struggle more, but we have to continue to educate, continue to inspire, continue to hope, and continue to struggle. But the real story is the people of this country, and particularly the young people of this country, who are willing to stand up to something that thinks itself as the most powerful nation in history. Well, I don't think it is. It may be powerful in wickedness. But that's a dark power. And so what we want is the power of young, energetic spirit to free the land, to free the people, to free the community, and to sustain our people, our beautiful African American, Caribbean American, white American, all our people who want what we used to say, peace and freedom and justice. Well, COINTELPRO was a secret program that J. Edgar Hoover, who you saw his picture, he looked like a reptile, devised. And it was like a 10-point program to destroy the Black liberation movement. And the Black Panther Party was a very significant part. It wasn't only for the Black Panthers. They wanted to prevent Black radicals and revolutionaries from gaining respectability. They wanted to prevent the rise, this is the key one, number one, prevent the rise of a Black Messiah that could unify the Black masses. And they had some candidates. They said Elijah Muhammad, but he's a little too old. So-and-so, but then like I think it was, who was the AIM, not AIM, Underground, I'm blanking. Underground? No, in Philadelphia.
Oh, MOVE.
No.
Oh, before MOVE.
Yes.
RAM.
RAM, Revolutionary Action Movement, but they were kind of underground. There was Stokely Carmichael, and there was Huey Newton, and so they weren't sure. The run that they took out was Fred Hampton. That's who they realized was that potential black messiah. He was young, he was wholesome, he was educated, he'd been an activist since he was a teenager. Fred Hampton, at the age of 12, had started breakfast for children at his school when he knew that children didn't have food. So there was a very systematic and carefully plotted out effort to eliminate our organization. We didn't know about it by name, we knew about it in fact. The disruption was nationwide. I didn't see, what happened in New Haven was on the other side of the country from the West Coast. What we could see in California was like how they use violence. You know, let's shoot them down, let's kill them, let's do what they did to Bobby Hutton. Whereas in the East Coast, they use arrests. They'd set you up. And so they had arrest of Bobby Seale when he came out there, charging him with something, arrest of Erica Huggins, who was in charge of the chapter in New Haven, and they used the courts more in the East Coast and the weapons of the police more in the West Coast. But the idea was to completely destroy and disable and eliminate this organization of young people, because what they said is they want to prevent the rise of a black messiah who could unify the masses. And so that's what you're seeing in the murder of Fred Hampton. In the case of Alex Brackley was a young man who was handicapped. I think he had a stutter or something, and it was just by, he was not supposed to be staying in New Haven. He went up there with some Panthers from New York. He was supposed to come back, but he didn't want to come back, and he stayed up there, so he was manipulated into the situation where he ended up getting killed. And they didn't care. I mean, one of the things that's so obvious is the total disregard for the lives and the families and the people who made up the Black Panther Party. They were expendable, they were seen as enemies, and they just took us out.
Sister Kathleen, there's another question. What inspired you to join the Black Panther Party?
I was in high school in 1963, and I saw 3 girls on the front page of the Philadelphia Inquirer, and they were on the back of a paddy wagon in Georgia, protesting the fact that blacks couldn't register to vote, and they were going to jail. And then in the story, so they were singing in jail. And I was so impressed. I said, well, these are girls, they're like me, they're in high school, and they're taking on these redneck racist police in Georgia. I mean, this is the height, to me, the height of courage. And I was in a school in Philadelphia, but I wanted to be like them. I wanted to do what they did, but I couldn't exactly go down to Albany. But that organization was called SNCC, so I wanted to be in that organization. And long story short, by 1966, I was a student in New York, and there was a SNCC office in New York, and after Stokely Carmichael called for Black Power in Mississippi during that march in 1966, I knew some people who knew Stokely Carmichael. I found out where the SNCC office was, and I met the new incoming director. This is Black Power. This is not the SNCC that I wanted to join back with the Albany movement. And I met Ivanhoe Donaldson, who had come from Mississippi to New York to take over the New York office. And we met at a party, and he said, well, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm looking for a summer job. He said, I'm looking for a secretary. Come down to the SNCC office. Oh, this is like heaven. I got to go, and I've been wanting to get in SNCC since I was in high school, so I joined SNCC in New York, Black Power SNCC. I stayed there for about the first 5 or 6 months, and the man who I knew well as a mentor, his name was George Ware. There was a movement in Tuskegee, which is my hometown, and George Ware had been very involved as a student. He had graduated and had come and worked as a chemist in New York, and his friend, Ernest Stevens, who was also from Tuskegee and also from my hometown, who was also my boyfriend, they were all living in New York. Sammy Young, I don't know, most of you never heard of Sammy Young, but Sammy Young was an activist in Tuskegee in SNCC, And he was in my cohort of friends, and he was murdered. He was murdered because of he was murdered because he was a civil rights activist, and he was registering so many people to vote, and he was going back and forth between Lowndes County and Mississippi. He was targeted. The Deacons for Defense and Justice were protecting his home, but he was a target. But the person who took him out was a Klan-type white man in a gas station where Sammy went to get something stopped and wanted to use the bathroom, and they argued over which bathroom, you know, the ones that they used to have for black people and the ones now that were no longer black and white, but he was going to use the one that was for white people, and the man said, no, you had to use one, and they argued, and he shot him in the back and killed him. So at that point, Sammy was still in school. George Ware had graduated. He felt so guilty. He felt so responsible. He said, I can't stay up here in New York and work as a chemist. I have to go back in the movement. So he went back to SNCC in Atlanta, and he said, Kathleen, I want you to come with me. So I came down, and it was the Black Power, SNCC. The whites were pulling out. The money was going away. It was like really hardcore organizing. We put together a conference to explain Black Power, and the conference was in Nashville. It was supposed to be at Fisk, but because it was Stokely Carmichael and Black Power, they said, you can't be on our campus. Oh, no. So a pastor of a small Episcopal church gave us a church, and then there was a snowfall on the East Coast, and all the airports were shut down. So all these professors and intellectuals we'd invited to the conference couldn't come, except for one. And his name was Eldridge Cleaver, and he came from California where they didn't have any snow. And we met, and he said it was love at first sight. I cannot say that. But about 10 days later, I was in love with him. And he had to stay in California because he was a parolee on control. He couldn't leave the state, particularly since he came to visit Black Power people. And so I wanted to see him. I would go visit him in California, and then I'd come back to Atlanta. And at one point he said, you got to come help us. Huey Newton's been shot. This is the thing you see in the film. Huey Newton could have died, but he didn't. At the time, I'd say the only adult in the room was Eldridge. All the women Panthers were in jail. They had teenagers and Eldridge. And he said, you got to come out here and help me. And I said, when I get my tax return, because we didn't have salary, I got some money and flew out to California in November. We got married in December, and I stayed in the party all the rest of that time. So those are the way the things in the movement happen. You don't exactly plan it out. You want to be somewhere. I did want to be a revolutionary. I did want to be in the movement, and I thought I was in it in Atlanta. In fact, the people in Atlanta were very unhappy that I picked up and flew out to be with Eldridge Cleaver in California, but I was happy. Does that answer the question? Okay, I got carried away. What is it?
This one is, I don't know, did you watch the Super Bowl halftime performance?
I was on an airplane leaving New York where they had a screening of this film at the Apollo, and I went to Atlanta and got there at midnight and went home and went to sleep. No, I did not see the halftime. In fact, I got some email from people. What do you think of it? And I said, I didn't see it. When I saw it, I was offended. It was pornography, basically.
Well, Kathleen, if I may, we have two questions about this one. So if I could use the language they use. I said if I could use the language used by the questioners.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm not using I'm sorry. I just don't like taking stuff from Kathleen.
Close to you. Okay.
No, but I want to put in the language of the questioners because we had a couple of them. Please offer your comments regarding the Super Bowl halftime performance, specifically Beyonce's tribute or lack thereof to the Black Panthers.
Well, first of all, we were not pole dancers. We did not shake our booties, okay? We did not wear whatever you call those things,
I don't know what they are.
Fishnet stockings. At least if we did, we had on clothes. So I don't know what that's got to do with the Panthers. I think it has a lot to do with what's the right word, exploiting in the basest way female sexuality. And the reason I say this is because the men Panthers who saw that, who made a comment online, said, oh, I like it. Well, I think it's repulsive, frankly.
Oh, you can hold that knife.
Okay. Oh, we got one now. Okay.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Kathleen, it says, what advice do you have for starting an organization aimed at black liberation, as well as smashing the state as we know it? How do we avoid agents?
Well, I can't give you much advice on smashing the state. The state seems to have smashed the organizations, and the state is very, very, very complex and all-encompassing right now, and they have all the budget. However, you can build organizations. And I think the first thing to pay attention to is to have face-to-face contact with the people you're working with, to know who they are, where they live, and to have some ties with these people in your community, in your family, etc. So you have trust. You have to build trust. You can't just be there claiming you're whatever. You have to have some basis of linking and knowing these people in the organization and out of the organization, and you have to have some sense of community with them and what you care about doing, so then you can move on from there, and you have an ability to isolate or determine who is your enemy. That's the problem. If you're really, really serious, you will have enemies, you will be spied on, but you can't let that stop you. You just have to be able to control for that.
There are several questions that asked about women's contribution in the movement and the black liberation struggle. Maybe we can put it in context of maybe what they didn't talk about in the movie as well.
Women's contribution to the black liberation struggle is absolutely 100% fundamental, usually without credit. Women are always and have always been very central to our liberation, to our efforts to become independent, to get out of slavery, to get out of segregation. However, just as in many other realms, women are not given credit for what they do. I don't know how many of you are church people, but if you are familiar with the structure of the churches, it's usually a deacon, it might be a man, or two deacons might be a man, and the minister's a man, the rest of the people are women. So that's our structure of liberation in a certain sense. It's this women doing the work, women taking care of the people, women maintaining the home, women raising the money, women not taking credit, and the movement, and then really, in many cases, women holding up the men, very anxious to see them exercising leadership. So that's a model the Panthers had that to some extent. Although I would just say there were a lot of young women in the Black Panther Party, and there were a lot of young men in the Black Panther Party, and the leadership was among the older people. When I say older, I meant Bobby Seale was 32, Eldridge was 32. When I came out there, I think I was 21, and one of my friends who was 16 said, well, Kathleen, you're 21, you could be a leader. So.
I want to make a comment too, Kathleen, just so folks have other references as well. I think even going back to the New Haven incident, some of the people who were involved have written books on them. Warren Kimbrough and some of those folks. Yeah. And then you also have, just this last point we were talking about, Kathleen, about people like Safia Bukhari, her book about, so that some of the young folks will have, or not just the young folks, but folks that have references too that they can go to. And it leads into another question I'm going to ask you right after this one though, which is about your transition to, well, I'm going to ask you now. How was your transition to academia? Given your background, how was that transition?
Well, I had dropped out of college in 1966 for the second time and joined SNCC, and I went into SNCC, and then I joined the Black Panthers, and I got married to Eldridge. He left the country. I joined him in Algeria. We had 2 children in Algeria, came back in '75, and the party was pretty much kaput. And in 80-something, I can't remember what, I just basically realized that I should go back and finish college. And I wanted to get out of California and get away from Eldridge because I thought he was going crazy. And so I applied to Yale University on my own. And Yale sent somebody to my job to interview me. Well, I thought that was normal. I thought they interviewed everybody. No, I think they wanted to see who this person was. She interviewed me, and I was applying as a transfer student, and that means you come in the middle of the year. But then they said, no, we have a program when you can come at the beginning. So I basically had 3 months from the time I was accepted to pack up and leave. I took my children and moved to California, moved out of California to New Haven, and sort of rebooted my college education, went to law school, and at Yale, which was a pretty good place to go to law school. And then I had some opportunities, one of which was to clerk for Judge Higginbotham, which I took. And after that, he said, well, he'd asked all his clerks, what do you want to do? I said, I want to teach. I want to teach law. And he said, okay, I'll help you. And so Judge Higginbotham gave me a wonderful recommendation at Emory Law School, and I went there, and I'm still there. So it was a career change.
I see, something. I also want to make an elaboration. The question about Michael Bainum made me think of Ahmad Rahman. Ahmad Rahman, like Kathleen, was Kathleen's finishing her memoir, and Ahmad had shared some of what he was writing about, and that would include the discussion about Michael Bainum, for someone who was asking that question in particular. I remember that. Kathleen, here's one. It says, of course you have an opinion of how black youth, boys, and men are being killed by police in alarming numbers. Please share with us your thoughts.
I don't want to say it's the same old, because it's a whole new generation. However, I will say that that was the shocking reality that we were facing when the Black Panther Party began. In fact, our very first newsletter was, why was Denzel Dowell killed?
Yes.
It was a 17-year-old boy who had done nothing, and he was fleeing the police, and he shot in the back and killed. His mother couldn't get anybody to help her, investigate it, do anything, except the Panthers came out to Richmond, California. And I remember the very first newsletter, it says, why was Denzel Dowell killed? So the Black Panther movement began really with an investigation and a protest and an effort to help the mother of someone's son who was murdered by the police. And the murder by police of the sons of mothers is getting worse and worse and more. They're getting younger and younger. And so it's really has a feeling of genocide. It's not that numerous, but it's like, it's targeting families, it's destroying families, it's telling your community your lives are not worth anything, your sons don't matter. And when it comes down to killing children, it's genocidal. So it's not new, it's just that it doesn't stop. And what bothers me is it's a new generation of policemen and a new generation of black youth. And when it was happening in the 60s, there were a lot of uprisings and rebellions and revolts because of these killings. I'll never forget the picture of Newark with a little boy in a pool of blood. And that city was torn up for 4 days. But they've killed little boys since. Here and now. And so our communities aren't as wholesome and not as able to challenge that. So it's a genocidal hostility on the part of a certain racial element. I don't think all policemen are racist. I don't think all policemen want to commit genocide, but there is an element in there that cannot be restrained. And they seem to have too much authority. And they're just now, what is it? I think in Chicago, I think a policeman was indicted just recently. Just recently. How many Chicago police have murdered people? My goodness. It's atrocious. It's just an atrocity. I guess our black people, our black community is long suffering. But the Black Panther Party came into existence against that. And I'd like to see some other activity come into existence against that myself.
Use some prerogative that I may not have, but the issue in this issues around this city and region having to do with water, and given the expansiveness of the Black Panther Party's attack on on these modes and methods of oppression. You have folks who are who've been put in jail. Some are revolutionaries themselves, like Marion Kramer, who were preventing the shutoff of folks' waters in Detroit and Highland Park. And then, of course, you have this issue in Flint, where you have something that is just an atrocity. And I just wanted to get given the breadth of what the Panthers focus on, from the medical health of black folks to the education to free breakfast programs. What is your, do you have any points you'd like to share about this? It's systematic targeting through emergency managers, through predominantly black communities, especially with issues like water.
It's worse than that. It's genocidal. Yeah. This isn't targeting, this is murder. Yeah. And this is not the only country where minority that's racially or religiously distinct has been targeted for genocide. These things do happen. And there are people, unfortunately, in this country who think that that is a solution. Not everybody, and most people think it's illegal, but that doesn't stop people with this kind of Nazi mentality. Or it's beyond maybe not just Nazi mentality, but a mentality that can discredit the rights of certain people to live. Only our kind can live. And unfortunately, there are black people in that group.
Tell it.
Okay?
Yeah.
I guess they are signing on with the majority or whatever. I don't know. I can't understand it. I just don't, I don't understand people who think that way regardless of their race, but I can't understand why black people want to participate in the destruction of their own community. Or maybe they don't identify with this community. I don't know. It's problematic. It's very problematic. Pardon? But are overseers murderers? Well, you know, this shows how poorly organized our community has become. That we cannot stand up and call these people out and have something done. I mean, this is this a consequence of integration? I don't know. I don't know. I don't understand it. I really, I have a problem with people who want to destroy their own community. I don't understand it.
Yeah. Well, here's a, I'm sorry, do you want to engage that?
Oh, here. Please. Stand up so we can hear you. Or I can hear you.
Sure. That's right.
Thank you. Thank you. Good.
That's the emergency manager.
Good.
Our organization exposed slavery.
That's right.
So with all
Thank you.
the badness, we have to celebrate the strength.
That's right.
Yes,
That's
thank you.
right.
Thank you so much.
That's right. That's beautiful. And that's something that's so beautiful.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
About coming here and in Detroit, that we fought, we continue to fight, we have victories and real victories to show to our children. If we didn't have real victories, the white supremacists are right. Why are you celebrating your ancestors? They didn't do anything better to get you here. We're not here because of the good graces of white people. We're here because we stand on the strong shoulders. Many of them are in this room. And we have actual victories. Just because they changed the game after you win doesn't mean you didn't win. If you kick that butt up and down the street, you going home with the championship belt and you get mugged on the way in your door, that don't mean you didn't kick their butt down the street and get that belt. The thing is, teaching a catechism of impossibility that we'd have no victories, have no success. And we need to resist that, and we do resist that, and sisters like that is making that point, and there's a living example of it right here.
Well, it's a mind game. It's a mind game. It's a mind game. And we have wonderful minds in our community. We have the most ancient minds. We have the most ancient traditions. And they're trying to make it seem as if there's something wrong with our mind.
That's right. That's right.
That's one of the tricks. What do they call it? The tricknology.
That's right. That's right. Started right here in 1930. Tricknology. Somebody know that language I'm talking. Here's another question, sister. Oakland in the 1960s was the perfect city for the Black Panther Party to establish themselves. If the party was to make a resurgence, what city would be most ideal?
Well, why was Oakland ideal? Because it never had any organizations. So they didn't. They didn't really have much of an NAACP. They didn't really have much of anything going on in Oakland. The community of black people that came to Oakland came from Alabama, came from Louisiana, came from Arkansas, and they had, like Huey Newton was born in Louisiana, Bobby Seale was born in Texas, but they ended up in the communities that came for the World War II jobs, not necessarily prosperous families, but families that were not under the heel of the Southern races. And they started this organization in a town that had very little organization. So I don't know if that makes it ideal, but it sounds like a town where there's not been much organization, there's a lot of police brutality, and a very large working class black community is ideal, according to that. I don't know where that town is. I'll tell you one thing, it's not Atlanta, Georgia, where I live. Pardon? It's Detroit? All right then. All right then. If it's in Detroit, then that seems like we're organizing in a fresh new way could take root. But Detroit is known for organizing. Detroit's had a whole lot of organizing. Detroit's sophisticated.
All right, all right. Here's Sister Kathleen. Sister Kathleen, here's a question, especially considering your role in the Panthers, especially internationally. So the questioner asks, in what ways should black people in the U.S. express solidarity with other oppressed people in the world, and it says especially Palestine?
Well, I was just thinking immediately about Palestine because they're the people who are trapped. These are people who are trapped in Gaza and trapped in the West Bank. They have a so-called government, and they're supposed to be in some kind of peace process. They are trapped. They are at the mercy of the international collaboration of Israel, the United States, and I don't know what other powerful military forces that keep them there. And what's happening, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. Children are running into Jerusalem and shooting people and getting killed. I mean, it's sort of like we're going to resist no matter what. It's very heartbreaking because I understand why they feel that way. But it's not because they're powerful, but because they're being murdered. And they're not getting much international support. Maybe in Europe, maybe like in Italy and France and places like that, but the Americans are giving way, 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 way too much support to Israel. It's extremely unbalanced. I think it's probably even more unbalanced than our struggle. You want to say something about that? Yes.
I believe that the issue of Christianity in the United States actually causes a lot of black people not to be valued.
A lot of Palestinians are Christians. They need to cut that out.
Well, here's another question. It says, in this generation, do you think a group can be formed that can be as successful as the Black Panthers?
Well, the economy of the United States in the 1960s was expanding, and there was a lot of wealth, and the educational opportunities were pretty powerful, particularly in a place like California that had free universities, that had good teachers, that had good schools, and they didn't cost all that much. So you could have people who lived in halfway decent neighborhoods with very good educations who could organize, communicate, and build a movement. Now you tell me, where is that place right now? Well, we got horrible situations with the schools. We have a very problematic residential situations. Either the neighborhoods are falling apart, or they're too costly, or there's a lot of class division. So I don't know. I don't know what that doesn't say that it's not possible. What I'm just saying is the problem, the level of opposition, level of, obstacles. Mm-hmm. The level of obstacles is higher, and the community potential is more damaged. That doesn't mean it's impossible, it just means it's harder, and that hopefully the next generation, it's young people who make radical changes because they come up with new solutions. If they can think straight, and if they stay in school long enough to be able to use their intellectual capacity and their organizational capacity. But what I see is a lot of targeting of young people to think, oh, well, all you want to do is sports, or all you want to do is be a gang member, or all you want to do is Do something simple-minded like make a music video or whatever. What about making social change? What about improving the life of the community? Not that there are not young people who want to do it, but they don't get a lot of, what's the right word, models. They don't see anyone that's doing so. I want to go do that, like the Panthers. I remember there was a woman I met in California. She lived in the south side of Chicago, and she read about the Panthers. She said, I have to go to California. There were Panthers on the west side of Chicago.
Right.
But she had to go all the way to California to be a Panther. But that people, when I was in SNCC, I meet people who want to come all the way to Atlanta to be in SNCC. And I think now, it's because Stokely Carmichael was there. But anyway. But there were people who are drawn to struggle. When they see it, they want to join it. And so I think that's something that is much more I'm not saying it's not happening, it's more difficult now, and the barriers to participating in struggle seem to be way too complex. We didn't have any distracting, stupid music videos showing people shaking their booty and saying it's a tribute to some revolutionaries. I mean, that's incoherent to me. But I'm old school, so no, there's a lot more distraction. A whole lot more distraction and a whole lot more exaggeration of materialism, because I think our communities have been flooded with, what would you say? I don't want to say bad vibes, bad examples. Bad examples.
Kathleen, let me follow up on this in a different sort of way. We saw in the movie how the importance of the newspaper.
Yes.
What do you think, given the context of groups like, or really networks like Black Lives Matter, the fact that communication is so different and technology is so different in this generation, you don't have to go to California to participate. You can do it through Instagram, through so many different ways. Now, I'm not saying this is the totality of it, but instead of publishing or putting out a paper, the technology as such is that you can use that technology for organizing, just like many in Black Lives Matter have done. Do you think that offers different types of opportunities for more successful organizing today?
Well, I will say, I was quite stunned, like many people were, and this is going back a few years, at the huge participation of young Black people when they went down to Jena, Louisiana. How long ago was that? About 10 years ago?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, these white racist thugs are going to take out a student, and because he sat on the white bench. I mean, and he's going to get criminal charges. It was outrageous. I knew one of the organizers who was with the ACLU at the time, and so I couldn't believe how many people why? Because they did it with internet, they did it with Instagram, they did all these things, and they gathered together and they showed up in Jena. It blew people's minds. So that shows that they can respond. You don't have to have a newspaper, but you do have to have principles, and you have to be able to communicate and have to be able to take action. And it does require a few older, more sophisticated organizers to kind of keep it in line, but not many. No, one or two will do.
Right.
But those people have to have a lot of commitment, and so it can be done. It's a matter of when and how frequently can it be done. And it seems like it has to be totally outrageous. Like what was happening in Jena was outrageous. But there's other outrageous things. Maybe they don't get the same level of publicity, but I see in young people a desire to change things. This was what we had. We want to change the whole world. Really, we really did. We said we were here to change the world, and we were going to do it in 5 years. Wow. A little exaggeration. But still, I think young people do want to change things. The question is, where are the vehicles and where are the support systems and where is the encouragement to permit that or to enhance that?
Kathleen, given the concentration of power that was used against the Black Panther Party to eventually destroy it, what would you argue was the biggest internal contradiction that the Panther Party may have been manifest? We get a sense of this problem with counterintelligence or counterintelligence with the William O'Neills, et cetera, but was there something that you would emphasize of the internal weaknesses? Amilcar Cabral would bring these points out. the challenges we have in ourselves that our enemy then exploits. Were there any that you think are salient enough to share?
Well, I think we weren't particularly sophisticated about how intelligence agencies worked. I think we thought our enemies wanted to be very brutal. They wanted to kill us. So you look out for people who are trying to shoot you in the head. Half the time, they just want to confuse you. They're sending me a letter and talk about your husband's having an affair with a white woman who lives over there. And I said, this is some stupid stuff, and throw it away. But some people would believe it. So they want to confuse you, and they want to distract you from what you're trying to do into being upset about something personal, and then they'll use financial issues and, you know, just tear away at your energy. So you have to have a better, clearer idea of what is the technique of destruction. It is not necessarily what you think, it's what they think. And the other thing is be prepared. Be prepared. If you want to go out and change the system, you're going to come up with resistance. The system is not willing to be changed. Okay? And so we need solidarity among ourselves. We need to be face-to-face. That's the key thing, have face-to-face meetings. How are they going to lie on you and tell you that this person said this and said that if you just saw them and you can ask them?
Right. Another question here is, do you believe...
He wants to ask something. This man with his hand up. Are we going to do that?
I appreciate that, but these are the...
Oh, we have the written questions.
Yeah. Do you believe minorities in America can achieve equality under the present political economic system?
Well, what minorities are you talking about?
All right.
The millionaires, they're the minority. I mean, I'm sorry. The present economic system and political system is stacked against people who are poor and people who are disorganized. It's particularly stacked against women. And there's too many families in minority communities, either Mexican or black, that are women-headed families. And so they're already undermined, already economically disadvantaged, and definitely politically disadvantaged. And then there's this racial issue over here. And then there's the gender issue. So if you're talking about real solidarity and real family cohesion, some of those things have to be adapted. Well, you know what I'm talking about.
I'm sorry, Kathleen.
Yeah.
Some of the questions are, maybe they open up opportunities for sort of a broader engagement of it. So I don't even know if I want to ask, but it's a question nonetheless.
No, it says, Huey Newton, was he an FBI informant? No, he was not an FBI informant. What he was an FBI target. The FBI targeted him. The CIA targeted him. While he was in prison in San Luis Obispo, he was in a very special kind of prison where he had keys to his cell and he could call the guards by their first name or something like that. It was a very, very strange place, and he was under the care of some type of medical doctors who gave him certain kinds of medicine, and he came out a very strange person. He was not an FBI informant. Now, FBI informants could manipulate him, and there probably was someone in his circle who was an FBI informant, but he wasn't.
Thank you very much, man. I resist the temptation of asking about Elaine Brown, but okay.
You can resist,
yes,
but the question's still there.
Okay. Oh, that's an excellent answer.
Never mind. You get the message.
What will it take to bring unity back in the black community? Now that segregation is over, do you think desegregation...
I guess segregation isn't really over.
When do you think desegregation has hurt the black community?
I would say capitalism has hurt the black community. You want to say something? One more question. Well, let this lady ask.
Sister Malika Insaroma. She has Malika Insaroma privilege. Please, sister, if you would.
I appreciate you, and yes, you all did change the world. You changed my world, and I'm sure that's multiplied hundreds of thousands. Acknowledge the 42nd day of the ascension of supremacy also changed my world. And I wondered if you would take a minute to speak on racism and white supremacy, number one. Number two, I think it was the Black Panthers that came up with the slogan, save the babies because they are the future.
No, we didn't come up with that one. We weren't that smart. We were the babies. But what I would want to say is I'm very pleased to hear you say that, because I was told that by another woman somewhere, someplace I was, and I said something, we wanted to change the world. And after the talk was over, this woman came out to me and she said, you did change the world. I said, you did? You did?
That's something.
You know,
Is that something?
I didn't realize it had changed enough. I guess we wanted a real transformation of the world. And too many of the problems that we saw have metastasized. And maybe they're not the same problem, but it's a problem that grew out of the old problems. And it's a lot of economic, political insecurity, domination, conflict. We're not a wholesome society. Maybe racism isn't the worst thing that's going on, but there's something that's like racism that's the worst thing that's going on, and it affects a lot of people, and particularly the most fragile, which is poor children, which shouldn't be the case. It really shouldn't be the case. There is no democracy left, in my opinion. You know, if we need a revolution, we need a revolution for democracy and justice.
That was the last question. I'm going to turn it back over to the person in charge, Charles Ferrell. But please join me in thanking Kathleen Neal-Cleaver. This has just been wonderful. Thank you.